Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios and brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Wilson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We're here, the terrific gentleman, backed by popular demand. He's been on a few years ago. He's a retired veteran and physician of 35 years. Grew up in Chicago. He held many occupations before pursuing a career in health education. And also, he's the author of the Emma Casey Chronicles, which follows the saga of the Casey clan, loyal and devoted to each other in a backdrop of war, crime, and violence. And he's got a brand new series out there, which is about a life of a wonderful lady who goes to routine, normal, good student in junior high, and the father's a professor until a mysterious set of boxes just appear out of nowhere. And the magic begins. Just think Harry Potter in a whole new level. And the life of a gentleman from the Plus Studios, somewhere in the Midwest, in beautiful downtown Wisconsin. He'll tell us all about it. Retired veteran physician of 35 years. He's the author of the book The Annie Abbott Adventures, and previously he was on with the Emma Casey Chronicles. Ladies and gentlemen, back by popular demand, formerly Michael Deeze, we got Mike Nelson. Mike, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks, Mike. That's quite an intro. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you on back as well, too. And you're a retired veteran physician of 35 years, grew up in Chicago, held many applications before pursuing a career in health. And we talked about the Emma Casey Chronicles featuring the trilogy of Bless Me Father, For I Have Sinned, and The Heretic. And you have a brand new series called The Annie Abbott Adventures, which your daughter Isabel had co-authored. And you had the Druid Stones, and you got the Race to the Red Queen. And this sounds exciting, I got to say that. And before getting to all that, Mike, once again, a very quick recap on how I got started.
How I got started writing?
Just starting in general and then getting to writing. So just a really quick recap. It's been about a few years, but we love to hear about how you got started again.
Oh, well, I was basically practicing medicine, minding my own business, and had a bit of a health crisis, which caught me by surprise. And one of those things where I went in the hospital, said, gee, I'm feeling a little short of breath. Think it should be checked out. Next thing you know, they came in the room. They said, you need to call your family right now.
Oh,
And so I called my family right now, and I ended up with a quadruple bypass.
wow.
And that day, I got it that day. And and I was forced into retirement. And I had been working since I was 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
for the man. I was working for the man.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's a common thing these days. Working for the man. Now it's like working for what? So,
yeah, exactly. But I had been doing that all those years, and now all of a sudden I was thrust into not doing anything.
mm-hmm.
And my father, who was a very quiet fellow, didn't talk about much of anything, didn't talk to very many people either.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to always ask him, "Hey, Dad, what'd you do in the war? Weren't you in the war? Weren't you a hero?" And he used to always say, "If you had to ask, you weren't there."
Hmm.
And so he never would tell us anything. And then um, just after, just as he was about to pass away, he gave me his diary.
Mm-hmm.
And his diary was listed all of the missions that he flew as a tail gunner on a B-17 bomber during World War II over Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The life expectancy of a tail gunner, I took the time to research this, was 5 missions,
Really?
and he flew 26. And so his diary was, it opened the world for me. It told me what kind of a guy, why he was like he was. If I had known, if I had had that diary, I would have had a greater understanding of the man, and we might have been better able to get along with each other than we actually were, especially during my younger years.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I had this idle time after my surgery. I wasn't going back to work. And I thought, well, I used to, one time in my life, I used to be interesting too. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write down a little bit about this, a little bit about that, something that my kids can have so that I don't surprise them at the end of my life with, boy, he was an interesting fellow.
Mm-hmm.
So one story became another, and I took a lot of my history and put into it, took a lot of the places that I've been and done, and it ended up being the Emmett Casey Chronicles. And one book became two, and two books became three, and I hear they're a good read. I wouldn't know, but I wrote it. I actually wrote it. I started writing it for my children, and then in the end, I wrote it for me.
Hmm. That is rather interesting. And of course, you start off with Bless Me Father as well, too. And, talking about the mean streets of inner city Chicago as a dealt with no direction and, just a bit about that and just getting the ball rolling on that one. Bless Me Father.
Well, Bless Me Father was pretty. When I was born, my parents lived in the projects in Chicago, the first projects that were ever built in the city of Chicago.
Hmm.
Eventually, it became the um, notorious Cabrini Green complex,
Oh, yes. I remember that. Yes.
and it was all of the people that were displaced when they put in the Eisenhower Expressway. They displaced them all and put them in these buildings together. And
Hmm.
so you had every ethnic background, every racial diversity that you can imagine crammed into these buildings, and they'd never been asked to live before. And about 99% of them were World War II vets,
Wow.
and because it was right after the war.
Hmm.
And so my parents lived in a one bedroom apartment that didn't have a window. And so that's how we started out in Chicago. And, the times were tough and the times were hard. And, you didn't take anything for granted, that's for sure. And, there's that old, how's that song go? You grew up fast and you grew up mean. And you either did that or you were somebody's patsy. So I grew up that way and I went to Catholic school, of course,
Hmm.
because it was better than the public schools, supposedly.
Hmm.
But parochial school and mean streets of Chicago, and without much direction except make sure nobody gets over on you and get over on anybody that you can.
Mm.
And
That is rather interesting as well too, starting things off. And of course, you also had the second book for I Have Sinned, where he basically talking about Mick being a tail gunner in World War II, coming home and scattered by the horrors, witness and everything else, and to tell the inability and willingness to heal as well too. And tell us about the second book. Just kind of like a spinoff of the first one that leads to the third.
well, the second book picks up where the first book left off, of course. The young fella who grew up in the streets of Chicago gets drafted and goes off to war himself.
Hmm.
And it turns out it's not a very good experience for him. I can speak from that personally. And he comes back kind of damaged. He's been blown up, and he suddenly sees his father for what he was and why he was. And the two of them have got this dance going on where they're not friends, but they want to be friends, and they see each other in their own reflection. And so the young fellow, he comes back from the war, and if you remember those days, the veterans, when I came back from overseas at that time, we were not welcome back as heroes. It's not like it was today.
Hmm. Right.
Nowadays, everybody likes us. Back then, you walked through the airport and people threw things at you and
Really.
swore at you and cussed you out and called you a baby killer and a murderer and all the other things, even for the ones like me who was a draftee.
Hmm.
And this fellow doesn't have a very good opinion of himself. And he dabbles in a little bit of a life of crime. He thinks that's what the Army taught him to be, was a criminal. And he has all of the skill set that he had from the street back in Chicago. So he gets good at it until he gets a little too far out on the limb and there's people that are sawing the limb off behind him.
Wow.
And he's caught between a rock and a hard place. The bad guys are after him and the good guys are after him, and he's going to go down. And there's no way out. So he has only one choice, and he plays that card. He calls his father.
Hmm. That is certainly interesting as well, too. And of course, thinking about being in war and everything like that. And of course they call it shell shock back then, but now it's like, in PTSD. So
Uh,
it's a case of like, shell shock, or you think it's gone to another level of that.
yeah. Well, I think that's probably what my dad had. He didn't. There wasn't any artillery or anything like that, but the entries in that diary are incredible. I mean, it's like, in the air 12 hours, 17 minutes, came in, landing gear wouldn't crank down, had the belly in, lost both waist gunners and the navigator.
Wow.
We go again tomorrow.
Hmm.
And so, it's just hair raising stuff. And it's no wonder that he didn't make friends. It's no wonder that he didn't like to meet people or anything else. And so, like me, like this young fellow in the book, he comes back too, and he doesn't trust anybody. He doesn't want to, be friends with anybody. He just wants to make money and he just wants to get out of town. And
Hmm.
so, when the push comes to the shove, though, there's only one guy that's as good a criminal as he is, and it turns out it's his father.
Hmm. That's really interesting. You talk about tail gunners, having that hazardous job. Is that considered the most hazardous, like, a really high death rate, or where does that rank in terms like, being dangerous and fatalities and everything like that with tail gunners?
Number one, he was number one. Actually, if you look at the statistics, there were over 100,000 airmen that died during the war over Europe in the air, which is more than all of the Marines that were killed in the Pacific War combined. The tail gunners life expectancy of 5 missions, which was about the same. The comparable one was a door gunner in Vietnam. The door gunners didn't last very long either
Hmm.
on the helicopters.
Okay. Okay. But then I think you were probably just just going from to that and being tail gunners coming back from the war and everything else. And of course, you also wrap up with the heretic as well, too, which basically continues the saga. And of course, the thing that stood out is intensely loyal and devoted, but only to each other. Maybe explain that one.
Well, that's the experience I had with my own family. I come from an Irish Catholic background, and so our clan is very tight, but we don't spread out beyond that. Most of us are cousins and aunts, uncles, and incredibly loyal. We all grew up together. We all spent our time together. We all spent our summers together. We all went to school together, and there's very little room on the outside for anything like that. Well, you take that and you put it into a book that highlights um, criminal activity, or at least exciting criminal activity.
Nowadays it is. So
Nowadays it is, and you make them into anti-heroes, but the people that they ally with are not the people that they meet on the street or the people that they've worked with or they get to work with or anything else. It's the person that's been standing next to you your whole life. And
hmm.
so it's your brother and it's your father and it's your cousin. And so you're incredibly loyal to those people because you know those people. You know them inside out. You know exactly how they're going to react in a situation. You know everything there is to know about them, and they know the same thing about you. And there's not very many trust issues that are better than that.
And do you think that type of setting would be suitable in today's society?
No, it's terribly antisocial. Yeah, it's not I would not advise that. No, no, 1 star. But it's great to have family values and everything else. But in this day and age, I really think that we need to spread out and we need to encompass more uh, diversity and encompass more people and their opinions and recognize their opinions as having the same value as our own. And so I look forward to a little bit more of that. No, I would have to say that that family model of loyalty is really great if you're thinking about stealing grandma's apple pie before it was ready to be served or any other like criminal activity. But in our day and age, I think we need everybody.
And that's really important as well too. And of course, it's also branching out, adventuring, and everything. And of course, speaking of adventures, this branches out to the Annie Abbott Adventures, which features the Druid Stones and the Race of the Red Queen. Co-authored by her daughter Isabel Nelson. We'll talk about that adventure in just 1 minute. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundWeb Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition rate. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international war ring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews. An Evil Oven adores by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com or 40 podcast platforms. Heard in 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, iTunes, Google, along with BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, and follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, and Facebook, and take us with you on any mobile device. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com, check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast, t-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com, check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also t-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today and support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here with the amazing author of the Emma Casey Chronicles and now the Annie Abbott Adventures, Mike Nelson, here on the Mike Wagner Show, from as Michael Deeze. He have blessed me, Father, for I've sinned, and the heretic. And of course, I guess you're getting into the truth as well, too, with the Annie Abbott Adventures, featuring the Druid Stones and the Race of the Red Queen. And tell us more about the Annie Abbott Adventures and how you got started on that.
Well, that's a really long story.
We got time for it.
I wrote the trilogy of the Emma Casey Chronicles, and I finished them. And I thought that I was done. I was not an author. I mean, that wasn't what I did. That wasn't who I thought I was, or anything like that. I had just sat down to write some stories for my kids, and they had turned into these 3 books, the greatest stories never read.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I was done. And my daughter, my little tail ender, said, "No, Dad, you need to keep writing. The stuff you write is good." And I said, "Well, I don't have anything to write about. I'm empty. I shot my wad." And she said, "No, write about us." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, look, ever since I was 8 years old, you used to take me out of school for 2 weeks every year. and you would take me on an adventure.
Hmm.
And you would, and I did. I took her to Big Sur. I took her to the Florida Keys, and we did sea turtle rescue. And I took her to Dollywood. I took her to the Apostle Islands in northern Wisconsin. We went to the East Coast, the West Coast, and we did it every single year. And the only thing that I, in order to justify with her mother that I was taking her out of school, it had to be a learning experience. So
Interesting.
we called those magical adventures
Hmm.
because what we were looking for was the magic in something. If you go down and you go to the Sea Turtle Rescue down in Marathon Key in Florida, and they're rescuing these monstrous sea turtles, that are the size of a pool table, and you see magic in all of that stuff.
Hmm.
And so she said, write about that, write about the adventure, write about us. And I said, well, that just sounds like a travel guide. I don't think that I don't think that sounds very interesting at all.
Hmm.
And she said, well, make it about the magic that we saw when we discovered it. We used to have this expression, we say it to each other still, see the life in all the things, and then you see the magic.
That explains the mysterious boxes peering out of nowhere hidden in the attic. So that explains it.
Right. And so in the story, of course, the main character is Annie, who is loosely modeled after my daughter.
Hmm.
And the college professor is me, which is easy because I was a college professor.
Uh-huh.
And so and and uh, what they just discover is that as she's making the transition into a teenager, when she's moving from 12 to 13 years old, things start to change around her in the world, and she starts having these strange experiences that she can't explain.
Hmm.
And she starts to recognize that something of power is visiting her, but only when she's paying attention to the life around her. It isn't anything she can conjure on her own.
Hmm.
So, under a lot of pressure and under some very unique circumstances, she discovers these old documents.
Oh, wow.
And the old documents tell her uh, that there's a treasure to be found,
Hmm.
and that it gives the clues and the maps to the treasure, but only the first step. And each treasure that the first step leads to something, which then is a clue to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And each one becomes more and more exciting and more harrowing until the point where it becomes life threatening for her.
Hmm.
And her father realizes that he can no longer protect her unless he admits to her that he's known all along that she's a witch.
Oh, really? Wow. I think that sounds like along lines of Harry Potter, National Treasure. I'm just trying to think of somewhere along those lines like that. That's what I'm trying to think.
But everything is a learning experience and everything is a teaching moment for her. And so her father takes it upon himself to take her on this journey of discovery. But in the end, she outruns him, and her learning curve, as soon as she does, her learning curve expands at an exponential rate, and she starts to see things that were never visible before, things that are not visible in the real world until you recognize that life and magic are the same thing.
Hmm.
And then she suddenly discovers that there are elves and dwarves and fairies and people that are all there to help her find what she wants to find.
Hmm.
But uh, an exciting, harrowing adventure, and her life hangs in the balance more than once.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Describe one experience in the story that really stands out, or like the most challenging one that she's able to face and manage to encounter and be successful at it?
Uh, Probably one of the early on in the first book, things that happen is that because she's starting to recognize how strong she may be, um, there are powers that don't want her to realize her potential, and so they attempt to intercept her. And her father intervenes uh, to between the two of them and steps in to protect her, and he is shot.
Oh.
And they get away, but they don't get away far before he succumbs to the injury and lapses into a coma.
Hmm.
And Annie has to suck it up. She has to find a way to get help. She has to find a way to get where they were going, which is where they were going to see one of the great teachers of all time. And uh, she uses her powers for the first time consciously to ask for help and to find it. And the strength that she shows, um, well, her father is possibly dying, and the things that she does where she hadn't been expected to do anything before is a couple of very exciting chapters
Hmm.
in
That's
the
rather
book.
that's really interesting. What are some other superpowers that she has displayed throughout the book? You don't have to give all of them away, but maybe just a few of them.
Well, what the whole point of the book is that not magic is not an airy fairy thing with magic wands and zapping people and making rabbits appear out of hats or anything like that. Magic is a recognition of life itself and the fact that life, just by its very nature and how diverse it is and everything, is incredibly magical. And when you get people that are on the same wavelength, who are recognizing the magical attributes of life, they communicate on a different level. And she suddenly realizes that she is able to communicate with people who are in agreement with her, at least as far as what she believes about life and magic. And she's able to communicate with them on a very unconscious level. And so she summons them, calls them to come and help, and they come and save her father's life.
Mm, that is really interesting. And of course, all this leads well to the race to the Red Queen. We'll continue with the Annie Abbott Adventures with Mike Nelson. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SonicWeb Studios, and brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Wilson Zia Missing. We'll be back with author Mike Nelson of the Annie Abbott Adventures after this time. We're back with author Mike Nelson of the Annie Abbott Adventures, featuring the Druid Stones and the Race to the Red Queen here on the Mike Wagner Show, previous of the Emmett Casey Chronicles. And of course, we move on to the Race to the Red Queen. And tell us more about that and trying to stay ahead of the game.
Well, the first book, of course, it leads you along the ways, but the adventure is continuing and moving on. But at the beginning of the second book, a complication occurs where several of the friends that she's now has that accompany her on her journey, she's actually on her way to discover a hidden library that
Mhm.
has many of the books of lore and the lore that was handed down by the Druids and the midwives, especially their herbology and different things like that. And so she's on her way to find that. And along the way, they are hijacked by these same people who had attacked her father. And they discover that there has been an, a group of people raised that are designed to hunt her down and eliminate her. And the Red Queen is the queen of the elven race,
Elven
and
race.
she and when that happens, um, the elves are attacked, and some of them are killed, and a couple of other Annie's other friends are taken captive, and so the message goes out, and the Red Queen, who is the queen of the elves, has pledged her support, and so she raises her people, her she raises her army to come to Annie's defense, but they're outnumbered, significantly outnumbered, and so the queen is racing to Annie, and at the same time, Annie and her friends are racing to her so that they can warn her and assist her um, when the time comes. And so, really, it's not just a race to the Red Queen. The Red Queen is racing to them at the same time that the evil forces are racing to conflict with them.
Hmm.
And along the way, she encounters some incredibly wise people. She has to solve, for instance, she has to solve the riddle of the Sphinx.
The riddle, you say the Sphinx or the Stinks? The
The
Sphinx?
Sphinx,
Sphinx,
the
that's it.
riddle of
Okay.
the riddle of the Sphinx, which is a story handed down from mythology about how the Sphinx guarded a gateway that was only passable if they could answer the riddle of the Sphinx. And if they didn't answer it, they would be killed.
Huh.
That was the only answer. It was either answer the riddle or die. And so she has to face the Sphinx somewhere along the way.
Hmm.
And
I think I remember that. That was in Greek mythology. Is that right?
Greek mythology. Yes,
That
sir.
was it. You know what? I think that's starting to make sense now. It makes you think of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit all coming together. That's what I'm more thinking of. And of course, you had to incorporate into the Greek mythology. And how about some of the other stories involved as well? You have the race of the Sphinx, which is Greek mythology. You had the elves as well too. And what are some of the others that you had incorporated?
Well, there's quite a bit of Druid lore and Celtic legend that's involved in it. The Druids, of course, were the great teachers of their time, but there were also the groups that helped to control much of the wisdom that was dispensed back in the Middle Ages with Druid lore and Celtic mythology. One of the main characters is an individual known as Circe, who is descended from Circe of Greek mythology, um, uh, and probably, at least as far as they know, the oldest person that walks the planet, because she may have been alive all those years, not just descended from.
Hmm.
Um, so she's a pretty interesting individual as well. And there are some uh, other things. The land of Aztalan, which I told you about.
Yes, that's
And
right. I think that was oh gosh, what was it? Chronicles of Narnia, Land of Aslan. Is that
yes,
it? Or
well, Aslan also is one of the villages that was created by the indigenous species before recorded histories in the United States.
Mhm.
And they built pyramids. Cahokia Mounds is one of them, just outside of St. Louis. Also, Aslan in Jefferson, Wisconsin. Um, and these are people that weren't really Mayan. They were pre-Mayan, and they had these huge civilizations that just disappeared into the prairies. They just walked away from their villages of 300,000 people, and they just walked off into the prairies and disappeared. And so their society is also represented in these books, and they present a mystery of their own, where they came from, where they went, and who they truly are. And once again, Annie meets them and befriends them.
Hmm, that is really interesting. And where can we find the Annie Abbott Adventures work, and also your works, including Emma Casey Chronicles? Where can we find all your works at?
My things, they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, uh, uh, places like that. All of the online outlets that feature books, BookBub, and all of that. I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's on all of them. And like I say, they're the greatest books never read. But I wrote them uh, for us, and I want to share them with other people. But the truth is, I wrote them for my kids and I wrote them for me, and they just came out really good. So I think they're worth a read.
Mhm. And you did it for the Red Queen as well. I could tell.
I did it for the Red Queen. You're darn tootin'.
There you go. That's a good thing. We're here with author Mike Nelson of the Annie Abbott Adventures here on the Mike Wagner Show. What else can we expect from you in 2023 and beyond, Mike?
Well, there's two books that are in the works right now. The third book of the Annie Abbott series, which doesn't have a working title just yet, but Annie is going to move back into the mortal world and see what she can do in politics. So it
Ooh,
should,
especially in the presidential campaign coming up.
well, yes, and her point, what she's discovered is that there are some evildoers that have infiltrated politics and are running for office, and so she's bound and determined to see what she can do to upset that
Hmm.
tea cart.
And I think we'll have you on for that as well, too, when election time comes around. So we're here with author Mike Nelson of the Annie Abbott Adventures on the Mike Wagner Show, the Emma Casey Chronicles. Mike, a very big thank you for your time. It's great to hear from you again. You're always fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Just keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your books?
Well, my website is authormikeNelson.com. That's a pretty easy one to remember. My books are available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, uh, and any of the online outfits, and most of the independent bookstores are starting to carry it as well, at least in the Midwest right here. And so if they don't have it, all you have to do is ask them to get it, and they will.
We will certainly do that as well. Once again, Mike, a very big thank you for your time. Great hearing from you. And you're always fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. Wish you all best. And Mike, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it very much.